We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
John Durham, after 4 years of investigation, released his much-anticipated report into the now-debunked Trump-Russian collusion scandal. Who won and who lost in this epic battle of narratives? Welcome back to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's special Durham Report edition, we're going to examine the questions the media refuses to acknowledge, the legal aspects and the political. I want to take a moment to say a special thank you to our listeners out in Brownwood, Texas on KXYL 1240 AM and 102.3 FM. Thanks for being here. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com. You can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. What did the release of the Durham Report tell us, and what does this mean for politics and professional integrity of the nation's enforcement agencies? Well, we're joined by our special Liberty Nation Durham panel to find the answers. I'd like to welcome aboard longtime host of this here show and senior political analyst, Tim Donner, Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor and man about town, Scott DeCosenza Esquire, and chief political correspondent, Graham J. Noble, who's been tracking the investigation since the very beginning. Gents, thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
Now, I know I don't want this to be a round robin format as such, but let's do a round robin first. What do we make of the report? Was it a smoking gun or a nothing burger? Tim, why don't you kick us off?
Well, for me, the most surprising part was that it said exactly what we've all been thinking it was for these many years. A strategy concocted by the Clinton campaign strictly to discredit Donald Trump and scare the American people off him. There was nothing more than that. And yet the leftist media is trying to say that there's nothing, how predictable. There's nothing new here because there were no criminal indictments. It's a nothing burger. But I think it's interesting with looking at the comment section of a prominent Washington newspaper with which all of us are familiar.
I saw that comment section today, Tim. Yeah.
There was a mixture where there's usually it's 20-1 leftists to conservatives commenting. But this time, there were a lot of people that said, look, Trump is horrible. He's a psychotic maniac, whatever. But this is not acceptable. So I think this is going to have some legs, but nothing like it should, because it'll essentially be brushed off by elite media.
Yeah, we will be delving into the media aspect of this. I think that the reaction from the Fourth Estate at large it's really quite something. It's like a full court concerted press. But Graham, what do you think what did you make of it?
I think, Mark, that it is very, to me, even the most vocal critics of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and even the most zealous Trump supporters on the other side, these people, to me, it cannot be understated how terrible this is. What happened with this Russia collusion hoax, and the way the Federal Bureau of Investigation jumped on it, and Durham's report very clearly, apart from, as Tim alluded to there, there's an entire section of that report that is devoted to how the Clinton campaign fabricated this whole thing to begin with and disseminated it and got it out there. And but the fact that it was investigated at all is, I don't think we can underestimate just how damaging this was to everything that America is supposed to be, to the to the rule of law and to an abuse of power and trust in our institutions. It's really, I think people really need to wake up and look at this for what it was, which was a kind of a Venezuela-like, banana republic-like, massive abuse of power for the sake of trying to prevent one man from becoming president and trying to make sure that another, his challenger, who is just about possibly the most unpopular person on the planet, got in instead. It's hard for me to put into words how bad this is, and I think the fact that obviously nobody is going to pay any price for it. There was one FBI attorney who was actually convicted, and the others, I think there were 3 or 4 other indictments. Each of those, I believe, ended with an acquittal, and nobody's going to pay the price for this. And I think the country, quite frankly, is damaged almost beyond repair because of this.
I wonder, Graham, if that's why.
Not to be too overdramatic or anything.
Sure. We'll remove the eyeliner. I wonder if that's really what's behind the comment section in the prominent Washington newspaper that Tim mentioned earlier, is that people have seen what's happened here. And at some level, people who read that or follow that particular news outlet, they already have a bad opinion of Donald Trump and are under the impression that pretty much anything we can do to stop him is justified.
Yeah.
But if it can happen to one side, it can happen to your side. And I think that might be the key to people really a joining of minds across the aisle, that this shouldn't have happened in the first place. And if it can happen once, it can happen again. But next time, it could happen to me. And I think that's a worrying.
Well, look, that's an indicator of how serious this matter is. When you have people who absolutely despise Donald Trump, and yet they are saying this was too far. This went too far. This was over the line. Because a lot of people on the left at one time, anything bad that happened to Trump for them was okay. Any crossing the line, any transgression of the law, any abuse, anything at all that would bring down Donald Trump, they would accept, or in theory, they said they would accept. But now some of those very people are saying, well, hold on a minute, this was a little too much. And I think that tells us how bad this really was.
Yeah, and I think Graham was being a bit of a shrinking wallflower in his opinion there on the situation. Scott, what's your take?
Well, I'll take the opposite view of Graham, and I'll look at this in its best light. And I think that considered in its best light, we can say that the principal federal law enforcement agency, the FBI, is completely and totally corrupt and has been since its inception. And unless the people get serious about replacing it in some massive fashion, we're never going to see the end of this. We have a Department of Justice building in D.C. that's called the J. Edgar Hoover building. They haven't even taken his name. They've taken down the statues of Jefferson and Washington and our founders, who were flawed because they weren't perfect, but they had genius ideas about how to help people be free. And yet J. Edgar Hoover was about his own aggrandizement and violating the civil rights of Americans by the score, and they keep his name on the front of that building. And that tells you, I think, everything you need to know about the corruption there. And again, I think that's a best case scenario. The worst case is, like Graham says,
don't hold back, Scott.
The entire republic is rotten to the core, and like a tree that you think is mighty and grand, but a lightning strike reveals it's completely hollow and barren on the inside. That's the other extreme. And I'm not sure where the needle lands for me, but the question you asked initially was, is this a smoking gun? My God, yes, it is a smoking gun.
Mark, you and I are both students of the John F. Kennedy assassination. And one of the conspiracy theories, which may or may not have been true, was that the CIA had killed Kennedy. Why? Well, after the Bay of Pigs disaster in 1961, when the CIA told the president that they had his back no matter what happened to the invaders of Cuba, and they turned around and abandoned. He said he was going to break the CIA into 1,000 pieces and shatter it and spread it to the wind. And I think there's a lot of people that now think that that's exactly what should happen with the FBI, that it needs to be broken up and replaced with another organization that can start from scratch. Of course, we know this isn't going to happen, but we're talking in any kind of business, this kind of activity would result in immediate dismissal and probably prison terms. But here, nobody even, not only did no one really get caught and get sentenced, except the one guy that Graham referred to, who nobody ever heard of, but they have the audacity to come out and say, see, there was nothing to see. It shows you that the left lives in an entirely different world than the right, not just different views or world views, but different worlds.
Hey, let's put it on the Republicans too. They control the power of the purse now. Let's see what they do with it, right? If they don't do some massive correction with their power, then a pox on all their houses. Then they both want it to continue, both parties.
All right, we'll be back speaking about these specific institutions after this short break. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5. Produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone. Hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner. Joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors. Deconstructing leftist narratives. Debating the hot topics. And remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe
You only
space.
did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.